Hello. I think it's a fireside chat just with myself. So yeah. No, talking about crypto's future and why interoperability matters so much, and the fact that the future of crypto depends on native interop. So why does interop actually matter, right? The blockchain ecosystem is increasingly fragmented, increasingly more chains, increasingly more virtual machines, and more users spread across all of them. Makes it challenging for any application, who obviously the goal of most applications is to capture really the most usage in general, so users, volume, liquidity, all of that, and that is being spread more and more every day. So what does it actually end up looking like, right? So hardest things right now in the current environment is primarily, again, liquidity fragmentation is one of the major ones. With bridges today, you start to see that be muted a little bit. Network effects are drastically hindered. You lose all composability. You lose any ability to take these assets and use them in other systems. But more than the network effects, what you want from the end user, right? The user experience just sucks. You need this for the user. It should feel like the internet. The end user doesn't need to think about like, what is the underlying chain? When you're using the internet today, you're not thinking about like where your servers are hosted. You're not thinking about what stack they pay for all of the microservices that live beneath them, or what tech stack decisions they're making. The end consumer needs to have an experience that they have an application that they want to actually use, and they get to use it, right? And so in the current environment, every user needs to think constantly about chains, RPCs, how to get native gas for that underlying chain, where the application that they're going to lives. All of this stuff is just an entire mess. So what is LayerZero? LayerZero is the #1 interoperability solution within the market today. It is built the hard way to protect against the worst case, which is how everything in crypto should be built. So it is entirely immutable. It is permissionless. It is censorship resistant. How LayerZero works is there is a LayerZero endpoint that lives on every chain. Now, an endpoint is just an abstract term. It's a library of smart contracts that deals with validation and messaging. Effectively, one endpoint per chain that allows any application on that chain to interact with that and talk to any application on any other chain. And so when we talk about like how this solution came about, the early days of interoperability, the broad consensus was that the way to solve this problem was to create a hub and spoke model, right? That you're going to have all of these chains and they're going to be fragmented universally, and that you're going to create a monolithic chain that sits in the middle, and that everything will route through that. And it's a very easy vision to picture, that every message, when two chains want to communicate, now go through this central point. Now, what we realized very quickly, and what the market has realized over the last couple of years, is that that's a very difficult thing to design, because the thing that sits in the hub needs to have more economic security than everything that everything that touches it, basically. So if you're in a hub and spoke model, that hub has the ability, if it's broken, even for a matter of a couple of blocks, it has the ability to arbitrarily write data to any chain. It can effectively lie to any of the chains that are connected to it. And so this design pattern, when you're talking about securing, not $100 million, not $1 billion, but tens or hundreds of billions of dollars, when you're talking about connecting Ethereum's most valuable applications, large amounts of Bitcoin, all of these things across all these different ecosystems, that becomes like a really heavy risk vector. And none of these systems, none of these monolithic middle chains have ever scaled past really about $1 billion of economic security. Most typically, though, tens or hundreds of millions of dollars. So LayerZero approach was there's going to be a single endpoint on every chain. That endpoint will be entirely immutable. You don't need to trust LayerZero Labs. You don't need to trust any other party. The code is law in this case, and it exists. Anybody can audit the code. It can never be changed. As a developer, you don't need to worry about the trust assumptions, because if the contract underneath can be changed, modified, upgraded, you really can't reason long-term about security or liveness. They're both at risk at all points in time. So a mutable smart contract that lives on both chains. Now applications now build, effectively send and receive. That's all they're doing. Just like a packet on the internet, you're sending an arbitrary set of bytes to another contract, and that's going to do something. Now, ways you see this flow typically today might be bridging an asset over. So if you've ever used Stargate Finance or any other bridge, you're going to give USDC on one side, and you're going to get USDC on another side. You're going to give ETH, take ETH. Right? That's how a typical bridge works. But it really can be much more complex flows with that. We've seen people build flows that are combinations of swapping and staking and bridging. We see people build flows in games. Back when Twitter introduced the profile picture hexagon tied to an NFT, you'd have games that if you kill a boss in a game, that mutates in the game. It's going to send a message to mutate the metadata of this NFT that lives on Ethereum. And when that metadata is mutated, that's going to automatically be synced and updated on Twitter in real time, right? So really any, like a packet on the internet, any arbitrary amount of data you can do across LayerZero. Now, the thing that gets very interesting with LayerZero after that is this modular security stack, the thing that sits in the middle here. What this was a belief that you'll never have, like I talked about before, a monolithic system that can control that will have enough economic security to secure every pathway. So what you're going to have, we always thought our frame of reference was always, how are you going to convince Uniswap or Aave to use this? How are you going to convince sort of largest applications in the world to put their own economic security at risk? And what you need to take, most of them already have some trust assumption embedded. So if you take Aave for Aave's case, Aave has a multi-sig that can change the risk parameters in the protocol. If they mess up those risk parameters, the protocol can suffer quite dearly, right? And so when you think about messaging, what you don't want is to layer on more additional risk. So when we thought about that, we said, okay, well, what would Aave want, right? Aave is going to want to have their same security council or multi-sig that secures their risk parameters to secure their messaging. That's possible within LayerZero. You can have any number of parties create what we call a DVN, a decentralized verifier network. That can look like anything. That can look like a layer 2 native bridge. It can look like an application creating their own. So this is done quite commonly today where applications want to be part of this stack. They want to make sure they secure their own messaging. Groups like Google Cloud and many others run these, and it can look like Polyhedra ZK Lite client. So anything from like the newest technology and zero knowledge proofs to single servers that sit in a Google Cloud center. The point is that an application gets to choose. And if you think about security, there really is just this line that really is a Pareto frontier of cost versus security, right? If you can have more security for cheaper cost, everybody's going to choose that point on the line. But if you look at an application, there's no way that an NFT project dealing in 3-cent NFTs is going to price security the same way as a protocol dealing with $100 million liquidations. They're just willing to price that differently, and this allows them to basically build that differently. And if you think about this outside of your pure DeFi lens, if you think about traditional finance and all of the institutions that are onboarding now, if you have Goldman Sachs and JP Morgan are going to settle a trade on the back end. So we just ran a POC with JP Morgan, Apollo, and Wisdom Tree. But if two large banks are going to settle a trade, it's very unlikely that they're going to have right access to a third party, to some neutral party. But what this allows is that in that instance, JP Morgan and Goldman Sachs can both effectively handshake, neither need to trust each other, neither need to coordinate with each other ever, both still sign off on the transaction in a way that has unified semantics across all interfaces. So LayerZero is the market-leading interoperability solution right now. Almost 70% market share in dollars transferred over the past year. More than 70% market share in message volume sent. It's done about 138 million messages. Secures tens of billions of dollars of assets today and has done roughly $60 billion of asset transfer to date since launching. So. Assets, you might know things like Athena, USDE, SUSDE, and ENA token, all built on LayerZero's OFT standard, EtherFi's, WeEth, LayerZero Zero token itself, all of these built on top of LayerZero. And more, we see interesting applications coming. And so the thing sort of that everybody knows early on is OFT is a way to bridge just an asset. Simple moving an asset, whether it's a stable coin, whether it's an LRT, and we have a lot of LRTs built on top of LayerZero. That part's easy, and the value prop is very clear. And basically what that is rather than needing to pay 6, 8, 10, 12 bips to some third-party bridge, you can basically do all of this transfer logic directly within the contract itself. So the token is the bridge. It doesn't need an external bridge. It doesn't need an external bridging provider. What this means is you can move a near unlimited amount of the supply for basically the cost of gas, right? You move $100 million for 3 cents. What that does on a global system is now it makes the supply of this asset in a world that was very fragmented before, it makes it entirely fungible. So if there's demand on Solana today, and it was Ethereum before there was this high premium to try to get that asset over there. Now you can be on Solana, you can jump to Polygon, you can jump to Ethereum, all for basically the cost of gas. And when you think about that and what that does to market dynamics, what it allows is for a market maker or a market participant to want to arbitrage a disparity between 2 different chains, 2 different markets. Now you can arb any spread to basically sub-cent spreads, right? If you can move the underlying asset for effectively just a matter of cents, you can keep markets incredibly tight. Liquidity gets better across all the long tail chains. You have more of a sense of like broader global liquidity. And then on top of that, yeah, so those are obvious cases is moving pure assets, moving NFTs, Pudgy Penguins, very popular, both with us and here as well. I think was one of the first ones, Pudgy Penguins, Kanpai Pandas, to go and build on top of LayerZero on our ONFT standard. But what we're seeing more and more today are actually full-fledged applications. So Stargate is an example of this. It's a bridge built on LayerZero. But Radiant's lending market, things like Balancer, doing VE-BAL, fee distribution on the back end. Things like Beefy, who actually doesn't use LayerZero in any forward-facing thing. No consumer will ever touch it or interact with it or think about it. But they use it to rebalance pools on the back end, right? And so more and more, a bunch of the LRTs, actually, EtherFi is a great example of this, built a native restaking solution where before, if you were on a layer 2 and you wanted to stake your ETH and get your staked ETH derivative, what would happen is you'd have to wait 7 days for that ETH to go back to Ethereum. You'd have to stake it, and then you'd have to resend the staked ETH over. With them, we created a solution that we call sync pools that allow you to stake directly on the layer 2, get your liquid staking derivative, and have all of that basically rolled back on the back end to just have a significantly better user experience. So lots of super interesting things today. What does that look like overall? Again, we talked about 135 plus million messages, 85 supported blockchains, over 130 assets have adopted the OFT contract, 55,000, actually almost 60,000 as of today. Total applications built on top, so like a very robust developer community. Tens of billions of dollars of assets secured and pushing, again, we're about $60 billion of total assets transferred, but certainly on the road to $100 billion and hopefully further on the road to $1 trillion of asset transfer, which I think is a goal of ours, right? So again, when you look at contract standards and what these look like, you have applications, you have OFT adoption, you have ONFT adoption, and then you have the chains themselves. And so we're on 85 chains today. Very easy to go to any EVM-based chain. So we're on almost every major EVM-based, whether it's layer 2 or whether it's just EVM-based chain. But more and more non-EVM. So started on Aptos, will soon be on Sui and Initia, and many of these others have launched Solana and continue to launch non-EVM. So the goal is connect everything, be this global liquidity layer built on top of LayerZero, and LayerZero being the underlying rails for all of this. So again, at its core, this space starts to fall apart if we don't have that. It's very clear the acceleration of chains is going to continue. I think if you spent any time around the conference today, most of the talk is around upcoming chains, more chains, right? This is Monad and Berachain and Mega ETH and Scroll and many of these other groups, right? We have tons of new chains coming to market, tons of more progress being made, whether it's on the ZK EVM side, whether it's on the layer 1 scaling with parallelized EVMs, or whether it's totally orthogonal approaches, again, like Solana, Near, Ton with Telegram. There is no world in which we all of a sudden start to get significantly less chains. And without a solution that deals with this, you're going to have a continued consumer experience where the consumer experience just is not able to do the things that we find so simple today on the internet in payments. What we need is the internet of Web3 or the internet of crypto, and that's really what we're here trying to solve. So, yeah, thank you all so much. I think I'm ending probably 5 minutes early, so it gives us 5 minutes if anyone has questions to come over and chat. Happy to talk to anybody, and thank you all.